I knew something was wrong before I even pulled into the driveway. You ever get that feeling where your stomach drops for no reason, like your body notices the disaster before your brain catches up to it? Yeah, that was me halfway up the hill heading home from the airport. The old cedar trees along my fence line looked different somehow, too open, too exposed, and then I rounded the bend near the upper pasture and just froze. The stone water tower my grandfather built back in the 70s was gone. Not damaged, gone. Just a massive scar of dirt and busted rock sitting on top of the hill like somebody had dropped a bomb on it. Pipes were sticking out of the ground, copper ripped clean out, chunks of limestone scattered halfway into my field, and water was pouring downhill through the grass like a creek because the main feed line had been split open during demolition. I just stood there holding my suitcase, staring at it like maybe I was still jet-lagged and hallucinating. That tower had been there longer than I'd been alive. Hell, half the people in Belridge County used it as a landmark when giving directions. Take the left after the old stone tower. Everybody knew it. Everybody. Which is why what happened next still blows my mind. I own 19 acres up in western Tennessee, mostly hillside pasture and pecan trees, nothing fancy, but it's been in my family for decades. My grandfather, Walter Boone, built that water tower himself after a drought nearly wiped out the farm in 1974. He hauled the stone up that hill one truckload at a time and engineered the whole gravity-fed system by hand. No city water up there, no county pipeline, just spring collection tanks feeding into that tower and distributing pressure across the property. Barns, irrigation, livestock troughs, the house, everything depended on it. And before anybody asks, yes, it was fully legal, fully surveyed, fully documented. I know because after Grandpa died, I spent almost 14 grand updating every land survey and utility record tied to this property. See, people around here fight over inches of land like it's the Civil War all over again. Fence lines start family feuds that outlive the people involved. So I made sure every boundary marker, every easement, every water right was crystal clear. Nobody questioned it either, until the Whitmores moved in next door. Nathan and Elise Whitmore came down from Chicago about a year earlier after buying the old Carter estate overlooking my North Ridge. Their place looked like something out of an architecture magazine, all black steel and glass walls, and these giant panoramic windows pointed straight across the valley. Folks in town called it the spaceship house. And honestly, I didn't have a problem with them at first. Nathan was polished, expensive looking, one of those guys who somehow manages to wear a sweater like he's auditioning to sell luxury watches. Elise barely spoke, but always looked irritated by something. The first time Nathan came over, I was replacing pressure valves near the tower pump house. He walked up smiling, carrying one of those insulated coffee mugs that probably cost more than my work boots. "Beautiful property," he said, looking around like he was appraising it for resale already. I thanked him, kept working. Then he nodded toward the tower and asked, "You still use that thing?" I remember laughing because around here that question sounded ridiculous. "Every day," I told him. "That ugly old thing keeps this entire farm alive." He smiled at that, but it wasn't really a friendly smile. More like the kind people give when they already decided they know better than you. "Well," he said, glancing back toward his house, "it definitely has character." I should have caught it right there. Looking back now, that was the moment he started seeing my grandfather's tower as an obstacle instead of a piece of somebody else's life. But at the time, I just figured he was another wealthy transplant trying to adjust to country living. I had no idea this man was about to turn my life upside down over a damn view. About 6 weeks after that first conversation, I flew out to Cairo for a 2-week engineering consulting job. It wasn't glamorous, despite what people think when you say Egypt. Mostly long meetings, dry air, and hotel coffee strong enough to remove paint. But the money was good, and honestly, I needed the break. Farming sounds peaceful until you actually do it every day for 20 years. Before I left, I checked the pressure regulators, topped off the backup generator for the pump system, and asked my buddy Earl to keep an eye on the livestock while I was gone. Everything was fine when I boarded that plane. Perfectly fine. Which is why standing there in my driveway after getting home felt so unreal. I remember pulling my phone out with dirt-covered hands because somehow I still thought there had to be an explanation. Maybe a storm hit it. Maybe the county damaged it accidentally. Maybe I was missing something obvious. So I called Nathan. He answered on the second ring, calm as could be. "Hey, Caleb," he said, like we were neighbors chatting about lawn fertilizer. I didn't even say hello. Where's my water tower? There was this pause, not shocked, not confused, just annoyed that I'd called. Then he sighed and said, "Oh, yeah, about that. About that." Like he was about to explain scratching my mailbox with his car. I started walking toward the rubble while he talked, my boots crunching over broken limestone my grandfather had laid with his own hands. Nathan said they'd hired a contractor while I was gone because the structure was unsafe and visually disruptive. Visually disruptive. I swear rich people invent new ways to sound insane every year. Nathan, I said slowly, trying very hard not to lose it. That tower supplied water to my entire property. He actually laughed a little. Come on, Caleb, nobody uses medieval towers anymore. Drill a well like everyone else. That's when the anger hit me for real. Not yelling anger. The dangerous kind. Quiet. Heavy. You demolished a functioning utility structure on my land. Another pause. Then his tone changed completely. Our property consultant believed the boundary line was disputed. No, it isn't. Well, regardless, the tower was an eyesore and frankly it dragged down the aesthetics of the ridge. I still remember staring at the mud under my boots while he said that word. Aesthetics. My grandfather nearly died building that system after a drought wiped out half the county, and this guy reduced it to aesthetics. You had no right touching it, I told him. I have surveys, utility filings, water rights, all of it. And that's when Nathan stopped pretending to be reasonable. Then call a lawyer, he snapped. Because it's already gone. He hung up on me. I stood there listening to the dead silence on the line while water kept spilling down the hill beside me. Then I called Wallace Mercer. Now Wallace looked exactly like a small-town attorney should look. Gray hair, old Ford truck, suspenders, and the permanent expression of a man who'd spent 30 years watching idiots create expensive problems for themselves. His office sat above a feed store downtown and smelled like old paper and black coffee. He listened to the whole story without interrupting once, just leaning back in his chair rubbing his jaw. Then he asked one question. You got updated surveys? I handed him the folder. 10 minutes later, he whistled low under his breath. Well, he said, your neighbor just bought himself a catastrophe. Turns out destroying a privately owned water infrastructure system is a pretty massive legal problem, especially when it serves agricultural operations. Wallace started making calls immediately. Surveyors, county utility records, state water management. By the next afternoon, we had everything documented. The tower sat entirely inside my property line by nearly 11 feet. Not inches. 11 feet. There wasn't even ambiguity. And because the demolition destroyed pressure distribution systems feeding the farm, my damages weren't just structural. Livestock systems failed. Irrigation shut down. Soil saturation around the hill caused erosion problems. It snowballed fast. Wallace calculated total damages at around $320,000. When he said the number out loud, even I blinked. That much. Wallace nodded. You're not replacing a decoration, Caleb. You're replacing infrastructure. He drafted a demand letter that afternoon. 7 days to pay for reconstruction, utility restoration, land stabilization, and legal damages, or we pursue aggressive recovery in court. Nathan's response came 3 days later through some giant Nashville law firm with a name that sounded like a private equity company. They offered me $15,000 for voluntary well conversion costs. $15,000. That was their answer. Wallace actually laughed reading it. These people think they can outspend consequences, he said. But here's where things got personal. About a week later, Earl called me around sunrise sounding confused. Caleb, he said, you might want to get up here. I drove up the ridge and nearly drove off the road. Construction crews were pouring concrete exactly where my tower used to stand. Steel framing, glass panels, excavation equipment. They were building some kind of elevated observation lounge right on top of the demolished site. On my property, I walked straight past the workers until I found Nathan standing near the foundation holding blueprints. He looked irritated seeing me, like I was interrupting his brunch reservation. You're building on my land now? I asked. He adjusted his sunglasses slowly. Our legal team believes the ridge line falls within our visual easement zone. That sentence doesn't even mean anything. He smirked a little. Look, Caleb, eventually people around here are going to modernize. You can either evolve with the area or keep clinging to old rocks. Old rocks. That tower carried my grandfather's fingerprints in the mortar. I remembered being 12 years old helping him clear weeds around the base while he explained how water pressure worked using mason jars and food coloring. I remembered him telling me, "Take care of what takes care of you," and standing there watching strangers pour concrete over the ruins of that memory. Something in me hardened permanently. Wallace filed suit the next morning. Property destruction, utility interference, agricultural damages, trespassing, unauthorized development. And then he added something else I didn't expect. A petition for equivalent structural remedy. Basically, if Nathan refused financial restoration, the court could authorize removal of property assets equal to the assessed damages. When Wallace explained it, I just stared at him. "You're telling me if we win." "I'm telling you," he interrupted calmly. "The law allows balance." The hearings dragged on for weeks. Nathan kept acting untouchable the entire time. New landscaping trucks rolled into his estate every few days. Caterers hosted rooftop parties while my farm ran on temporary water tanks and emergency pumps. Folks around town started taking sides too. Some people thought Nathan was a rich bully trying to erase local history. Others said I should have just taken the money and moved on. One guy at the hardware store actually told me, "Progress always looks ugly to somebody." Maybe, but destroying another man's livelihood because it blocks your sunset view isn't progress. It's arrogance. And arrogance has a way of eventually billing you for the damage it causes. The final hearing happened on a Thursday morning during one of those heavy Tennessee storms where the clouds sit low enough to make the whole town feel smaller. Wallace met me outside the courthouse carrying 2 folders and a gas station coffee. "You sleep at all?" he asked. I shook my head. Truth was, I'd spent half the night staring out over the ridge from my porch, looking at the glowing glass structure Nathan built where my grandfather's tower used to stand. Even from a distance it felt wrong. Too clean. Too polished. Like somebody built a luxury hotel lobby on top of a grave. Court lasted less than 2 hours. That's the crazy part. Months of damage, stress, lawyers, county inspections, expert testimony. And in the end it all came down to paperwork and measurements. Nathan's attorneys tried everything. Claimed there was confusion over boundary interpretation. Claimed the tower posed potential environmental instability. Claimed modernization efforts benefited surrounding property values. The judge looked exhausted halfway through their presentation. Then Wallace stood up and basically dismantled their entire argument piece by piece. He showed updated surveys, utility filings, agricultural dependency reports, photographs of the demolished infrastructure, even old county records proving the tower had been recognized as an active water distribution structure for decades. Then he showed aerial images of Nathan's new observation lounge sitting directly on my land. That part really seemed to irritate the judge. Judge Harlan Briggs was one of those old-school rural judges who didn't talk much unless he meant it. He spent a long time flipping through the documents silently before finally leaning back in his chair. I still remember the sound of rain hitting the courthouse windows when he spoke. This court finds the defendant knowingly destroyed functional infrastructure located entirely on the plaintiff's property. Nathan shifted in his seat immediately. The judge continued. Further, the defendant proceeded with unauthorized development after formal notice of disputed ownership. Then came the sentence nobody in that courtroom expected to hear out loud. The plaintiff is hereby granted equivalent structural remedy under assessed valuation. You could actually hear people whispering behind us. Nathan's attorney stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. "Your Honor, surely the court is not authorizing retaliatory destruction." Judge Briggs cut him off immediately. "I'm authorizing legal balance." That was it. Just like that. Legal balance. We walked out into the storm without saying much. Wallace finally looked at me near the courthouse steps and said, "You planning to move quickly?" I looked back toward the ridge, barely visible through the rain. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I think I am." By sunset the next day, 3 excavators rolled through the gates of the Whitmore estate. I hired a demolition contractor named Leon Baird, a former Marine built like a refrigerator with a beard halfway down his chest. Leon didn't ask many questions once he saw the court authorization papers. He just nodded once and said, "Where do you want us to start?" The observation lounge itself wasn't enough to cover the assessed damages. Nathan had sunk most of his money into the property's luxury infinity pool complex overlooking the valley. Heated stone deck, imported filtration system, custom Italian tile, Fiber optic lighting under the water. The thing looked like a resort commercial. According to county valuation records, the full pool installation came out almost exactly equal to the damages from my destroyed water system. Funny how life works sometimes. We notified county officials before beginning because Wallace wanted every single step documented perfectly. No shortcuts, no mistakes. Then the machines started moving. I'm not going to lie to you. Watching that first excavator arm punch through the edge of that pool hit me harder emotionally than I expected. Part of me felt satisfied, sure. But another part of me realized this whole thing had gone way beyond property damage weeks ago. This was pride now. Legacy. Ego. Revenge. Maybe all of it mixed together. Water exploded upward as the foundation cracked open. Glass railings shattered across the deck. One of the crew members cut power to the heating system, while another started tearing apart the filtration lines underneath. The sound was unbelievable. Concrete snapping, metal twisting, water rushing downhill into the mud. It sounded like a building collapsing in slow motion. About 40 minutes into demolition, black SUVs came flying up the driveway. Nathan jumped out before the vehicles even stopped moving. I have never seen a human being turn that pale that fast. He just stood there staring at the destruction with his mouth hanging open while Elise screamed at the workers to stop. "You can't do this," Nathan yelled, storming toward me through the rain. "This is psychotic." I handed him a laminated copy of the court order. He snatched it out of my hand, eyes darting across the page while excavators kept tearing into the pool behind him. "Equivalent assessed remedy," I said. $320,000. He looked at me like he genuinely couldn't understand how consequences had finally caught up to him. "It was an old tower," he shouted over the noise. "You destroyed a functioning water system," I answered. "For a better view." For a second, neither of us said anything. Rain pouring down, machines roaring behind us, muddy water washing across expensive stonework. Honestly, it felt less like real life, and more like the final scene of some movie where everybody loses something important. Nathan tried filing appeals afterward, of course. Sued for emotional distress, malicious destruction, property overreach. All of it got rejected. Judge Briggs even ordered him to cover a chunk of my legal fees after determining his continued construction during litigation showed deliberate disregard. But here's the part people still argue about around Belridge County. About 6 months later, after rebuilding a newer steel-reinforced water tower farther back on my ridge, I ran into Elise Whitmore at a grocery store outside town. She looked exhausted. Older somehow. We ended up talking near the freezer section for maybe 5 minutes. And before she walked away, she said something that's stuck with me ever since. She said, "You know, if Nathan had just apologized the first day, none of this would have happened." And honestly, she was probably right. That's the thing nobody tells you about revenge. Even when you win, there's still wreckage left afterward. The Whitmores eventually sold the property at a loss and moved back north. The county still talks about the case like local folklore. Some people think I went too far. Others think Nathan got exactly what he deserved. Me? I still don't fully know. I just know my grandfather's rebuilt tower stands on that ridge again, and every time I hear water moving through those pipes at night, I think about how fragile respect between neighbors really is once pride gets involved. But I want to know what you think. If somebody destroyed a piece of your family's history because it inconvenienced them, would you have stopped after the lawsuit, or would you have done exactly what I did? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about property disputes, revenge, and small-town justice, hit like and subscribe because trust me, this county has plenty more stories.